Brandon Rewucki's with us here. We'll get to the playoffs in a second. I do want to bring it back to the Jets for a minute. Both Adam Lowry and Pierre-Luc Dubois had great runs at the World Hockey Championships. I mean, Dubois, first-team All-Star for the tournament. What do you think it's going to cost to get Dubois signed? What does that contract look like? Assuming that there is a willing, if the money's there, to sign a 6, 7, 8-year extension, what do you think it's going to cost for the Winnipeg Jets to get his name on a contract?
Well, Huss, I'm glad you brought that up because a recent Skates and Plates episode actually dove into this very topic. So
I figured you'd be ready for the question.
Make sure you check that out wherever you get your podcast. So if we're going towards, let's do best case scenario, that the Jets are able to sign him to a long-term deal because nobody wants to talk about him signing a 1 or a 2-year deal and being out the door sometime soon.
That's bad.
That's bad.
Very bad.
That is bad. We want to avoid that situation. So interestingly, there's actually been 2 pretty solid comparables that have signed in the last couple of years that we can kind of look at and get a ballpark figure for what Pierre-Luc Dubois might get on a long-term deal. And that would be Nico Hischier and Suzuki with Montreal. And it's important too because these were both signed kind of mid or post pandemic, so you get a bit of a sense of what the flat salary cap did to both of those players on those deals. But Nico Hischier got, I think, 7 or 8 years at just over $7 million per season, and then Suzuki got 8 years in the high 7s per season. Now Suzuki had less production than Dubois has had so far in his career, but he did have that insane playoff run, so he kind of negotiated that at the perfect time for himself. And then Hischier has been pretty comparable points-wise to Pierre-Luc Dubois so far in his career. And again, both those players are centers as well. I mean, top picks for all 3 of those guys. But the Hischier one would definitely be what the Winnipeg Jets would bring to the table and say, look, number 1 overall pick, point production is pretty similar. He was also younger than you while he did it, and this is only what he got. So we're looking at 7 by 7, let's just say. Dubois camp will point towards Suzuki and say, he outproduced this guy and he got almost $8 million a year. So that's the number that we're looking at for a long-term deal. So if you're going to split the difference between those two, to me, 7 years, $7.5 million, that sounds fair. I think the absolute max you'd be looking at is a 7 or an 8-year deal at $8 million per season. And that would be with the Winnipeg tax thrown in. You know, like, hey, my client could go to Montreal or LA. What are you going to do to keep him here in Winnipeg? We'll bump it up to $8 million per season. Just because if you look at what those other 2 players were able to produce on the ice when it comes to points, time on ice, all that, it's a pretty similar situation to what Pierre-Luc Dubois is looking at right now.
Yeah, you know what? I could live with an 8x8 deal. I mean, if you told me that it was, it's maybe a little bit more per season, but you have that clarity that this guy's committing to you for a long time. I mean, there's a real value to that. And hey, I mean, if we're talking about getting a little bit less on 7 or 6 years, I'd rather just know that you have this player that you put so much into for the entire prime of his career and can now move forward knowing that this guy is a cornerstone in the middle of your top 6 for the foreseeable future, as long as anyone else on your roster is currently committed to via their contract.
Yeah, and the cap is going to go up. It already is going up slowly. So, you're not, I mean, dear God, hopefully monkeypox isn't another pandemic here. But, it should continue to go up for the next 5 or 6, 7 years. And, $8 million it's not a terrible price, right? Like it's definitely not a bargain like the Scheifele contract was, but I just don't think the Winnipeg Jets are in the same position now as they and Scheifele were back then. I feel like somewhere between $7.5 to $8 million on a long-term deal is a pretty good deal for both sides. And if the Jets find a way to get that done, well, you got Pierre-Luc Dubois through his 20s making either $7 or $8 million. And the other part too is he's only just turned 23. Like he's still really, really like he's been around a long time, but we know his floor is really a 60-point power forward that is going to play his best once the postseason starts to roll around. If he elevates his game to a 70, 80-point guy even, that doesn't seem all that outlandish. An 80-point guy that's kind of a throwback power forward, Yeah, I'll sign up for $8 million a year every day of the week for that.
Yeah, if that's what it's going to take to get it done, I think it's just important enough. And here, we can get into the speculative side of things because, and I don't know whether we really have any true answers, but I'll get your take on it. Do you think that Scheifele's situation has an effect on Dubois' situation? Do you think he's more likely to commit to the team long-term at that number if Scheifele's moved, knowing that he is the number one guy? Or is it just simply, this is your own business, you and your agent are going to make a deal that makes sense for you and your family going forward, and whatever the heck the general manager figures out with some other players, that's not really a concern?
Yeah, to be honest, I've never really understood that line of thinking. That it was brought up a little while ago. I mean, if Scheifele stays, even for example, it's potentially only for 2 more. It's not like it's a 10-year deal or anything like that. But look, if Dubois is looking for $8 million a year and he gets it and he's happy here, who the hell cares who else is on the roster, right? Like he's got his contract, he's good to go. Let's try and win some games here. So I don't think so. I mean, maybe if Scheifele was moved, and the allure of potentially like this could be my team, like maybe that's a bit of a stronger pull to keep him here. But I really don't think it has all that much, pull one way or the other, to be honest, because again, he's going to be looking for a long-term deal. And if he gets it from the Jets and he's happy here, then he gets it and you kind of move forward. If he doesn't want to be here, then Scheifele or no Scheifele, that's not going to change it a whole lot either. And he's going to try to force his way out the door in a couple of seasons. So I don't think that's necessarily a big deal. To me, the Scheifele situation is more along the lines of, can you move forward with the same group, or does a massive shift have to be made to show that accountability is going to change moving forward?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the general manager from those meetings at the end of the year, both in person as well as what we heard, is, heard loud and clear about what the state of the club is, and, it's on them to figure it out. And I think the players have sort of said their piece, and now they'll take care of their off-season business. And at some point this summer, we'll be talking about a deal for Pierre-Luc Dubois. The big question is, how many years is it going to be? And are we having this conversation again in 12 months from right now?